There are exactly two people publicly defending Donald Trump on the possibility that he might have committed obstruction of justice. Just two. Those two public defenders of Donald Trump are Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. That's it. That is the public defense team for the president, Giuliani and Trump. And both of them are completely incoherent when it comes to publicly defending Donald Trump. And that makes perfect sense. What they say doesn't make perfect sense, but the fact that both Giuliani and Trump are incoherent in their attempts to publicly defend Donald Trump does make a certain sense. And it means that there is no evidence-based defense of the president that is available to Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani. Because if there was an evidence-based defense available, at least one of them would use it. The country and the world are long used to the fact that Donald Trump is generally incoherent most of the time about most things. An incoherent person, though, with a wildly disorganized mind and no attention span could conceivably have a very good legal defense that could be presented by a good or average or even below average defense lawyer. But that's not what we have here. We have Donald Trump, an incoherent client who has been a public liar his entire life, being defended by the newly incoherent Rudy Giuliani. And that is a very, very big deal. And what it tells us tonight is that the president of the United States, as of now, has no good legal defense against any of the accusations that Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller might bring against this president. It doesn't mean that the president is guilty of anything, but it is just stunning. Think about it. Stunning that the president of the United States and Rudy Giuliani, as of tonight, have no good public defense of the president. It's one of those things that's a very big deal, but we can't yet be sure of what it means.
Nobody can be sure of anything.
He's absolutely right about that. Nobody can be sure of anything. None of us can be sure of what to believe as of now. But how strange is it that that was Rudy Giuliani's answer to this question? The meeting with the Russians, how can you be sure if the president didn't know beforehand? Rudy Giuliani's answer to that was, nobody can be sure of anything. With defense lawyers like that, who needs prosecutors? So why hasn't Donald Trump replaced his incoherent, weak TV defense lawyer who's doing a terrible job of defending Donald Trump? Well, there are a few real possibilities and rational possibilities for that. One is that Donald Trump doesn't know what good lawyering looks like and sounds like. After all, Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's lawyer for years. The same Michael Cohen who Rudy Giuliani now describes this way.
The guy is unethical. He's a scumbag. He's a horrible person.
Will Donald Trump's next lawyer be describing Rudy Giuliani that way someday? Another reason Rudy Giuliani has not been fired is that it is actually impossible to do a better job of defending Donald Trump. That might just be it. It's impossible to do any better than Giuliani has done. Rudy Giuliani goes into TV interviews with no real ammunition and just follows the Donald Trump, Kellyanne Conway model of speaking as fast as he can. It doesn't matter what the words are because there's nothing honest to say that could be helpful. And that's the way it is in a criminal investigation when you're guilty. There's nothing you can say that is both honest and helpful to your defense. So one possible explanation for the public verbal incontinence of Rudy Giuliani is that he's representing a guilty client. That is not an unreasonable inference in reaction to the public rantings of Rudy Giuliani. Yesterday, President Trump rose in defense of President Trump with a tweet that, as usual, has absolutely nothing to do with evidence. Is Robert Mueller ever going to release his conflicts of interest with respect to President Trump, including the fact that we had a very nasty and contentious business relationship? I turned him down to head the FBI one day before appointment as special counsel, and Comey is his close friend. This morning, Rudy Giuliani was asked about the president's accusation that Robert Mueller has a conflict of interest.
How can the president make this claim and not support it?
He doesn't have to.
What's the conflict?
I can't tell you. I'm not sure I know exactly what the conflict is.
Can't tell you. That's it. That's the best Giuliani could do with his client's own line of defense about Robert Mueller's supposed conflict of interest. Now, I'm sparing you a bunch of high-speed, incoherent words that Rudy Giuliani added to that answer that had nothing to do with the question. Now, here's another example of Rudy Giuliani's ignorance of his own defense case. Allison Camerata asked about phone calls Donald Trump Jr. made to a blocked number around the time of Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with Russians in Trump Tower during the presidential campaign.
When Don Jr. made, as you know, that day before the meeting, and I think after, calls to a blocked number, was that the president?
I don't know.
I don't know. That is a very important question about the president's knowledge about the Trump campaign's attempt to conspire with Russian government officials. And Rudy Giuliani's answer is, I don't know. Robert Mueller probably knows. And Rudy Giuliani knows that Robert Mueller probably knows whose blocked phone number Donald Trump Jr. was calling. And that's why Rudy Giuliani said, I don't know, instead of a good, strong, clear denial that Donald Trump Jr. was calling his father to tell him about the Russian meeting before and after the Russian meeting. Giuliani is right. For all of us out here wondering what happened in Trump Tower and in the Trump campaign and in the Trump White House, nobody can be sure of anything. But Rudy Giuliani is certainly acting as if he believes that Robert Mueller is sure of something that is very bad for the President of the United States. Joining our discussion now, Jill Wine-Banks, former Assistant Watergate Special Prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst; Harry Litman, former federal prosecutor and Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President Clinton; and Neera Tanden, the President of the Center for American Progress. And Jill, this issue of Giuliani's public performance, the newly, utterly incoherent Rudy Giuliani, seems to me to make a certain sense if Giuliani actually does have nothing better to say, if the evidence that he is aware of in this case gives him nothing else to say, it makes a certain sense that he just talks as fast as he can, as if he went to that Kellyanne Conway school of talking fast, to try to get through these interviews because he has nothing better.
I think the better answer would be for him to be silent. He ought to be zipping his lip, because if this is the best he can do, he is hurting his client. What he is saying really makes no sense. I read the transcript of that full interview, and it's almost impossible to understand what point he was even trying to make. And I think as a prosecutor or as a defense lawyer, you quickly learn that sometimes the facts are just completely against you and you're better off saying nothing. And in this case, that's what it is. But he's also hasn't got the law on his side. When he's yelling that there's no crime, that also isn't true. And this argument about whether the word is collusion or conspiracy or aiding and abetting is simply a question of terminology. Somehow the American public picked up the word collusion. There is no crime of collusion in the statutes, but there is a crime of conspiring together, of agreeing together, of working together, of aiding and abetting. And if you take criminal conduct, the hacking, and you use that material, you are part of that. And it doesn't matter if you are the gunman in a murder when you go in to rob a bank and someone gets killed. If someone else pulled the trigger, you're still guilty of murder because you were part of the conspiracy. And I would say that we have plenty of evidence of conspiracy here.
Neera, what Jill says about staying silent is absolutely true for most possible criminal suspects in their attorney-client relationship. But a politician, as you know, is in a different situation, and politicians feel compelled to defend themselves publicly at every stage of these kinds of processes. And we have seen Democrats in the past also find fault with prosecutors who are investigating them. We haven't seen anything quite as noisy as this. But if Giuliani has nothing better to say, and if there is a political calculation by Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani that someone has to be out there defending the president on TV. It's hard to think of a better way for Giuliani to do this if he's going to go on TV. Just talk fast. Don't make any sense. Don't worry. Donald Trump's voters voted for someone who doesn't make any sense.
I think that what's happening here is really that they don't have a case. They don't have a legal case, right? This whole debate about collusion, I mean, first we should just point out Donald Trump said there was no collusion for a very long time. Now Giuliani is like, oh, there was collusion. It's just not illegal. But what they're really doing is just playing semantic games to give an argument to their base at this moment. Because what's I think is really happening is that they don't have an argument for the prosecutor. They probably know the prosecutor has a pretty strong case of aiding and abetting a crime, conspiracy of a crime. They're not really disputing that. Giuliani's playing a semantic game about collusion itself, which no one has said the word collusion means a crime. Obviously, criminal conspiracy is a crime, but he's playing these word games. And I think what he really is trying to do, and what Donald Trump has been doing this entire year, is he believes he will skate free of this if Republicans are unable to act on any report of indictable offenses. And he's disciplining his troops and disciplining the Republican Party to attack Mueller, to oppose, to say everything's political, to make up this new argument that there's conflicts of interest, but they won't tell us what the conflicts of interest are, to basically malign the Mueller probe. So Republicans will not act on a report. And that is why these elections coming up in 99 days are so vitally important, because Donald Trump is placing a bet that the Republican Party, he could be found colluding or criminal conspiracy, abetting, or even shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue, and the Republican Party will do nothing about it. And that is why we need checks and balances and Democrats to take a House of Congress for some accountability for this president.
Let's take a look at some of the risks involved in the Giuliani TV strategy of talking so fast. Today, he revealed, and it seemed to be by mistake, that he believes Rick Gates, who is been indicted by the special prosecutor and is cooperating with the special prosecutor, was actually in a meeting strategizing how to handle the Russia meeting. Let's listen to this.
Lanny Davis has added that there was a meeting 2 days before the meeting took place with Donald Jr., Jared, Manafort, and two others, Gates, and one more person. Cohen also now says, because he says too much, that 2 days before, he was participating in a meeting with roughly the same group of people, but not the president, definitely not the president, in which they were talking about the strategy of the meeting with the Russians. The people in that meeting deny it. The people we've been able to interview. The people we have not been able to interview have never said that about that meeting.
Harry Litman, your reaction to that?
You know, it's a complete slip of the tongue by him. The only sort of use, you're right, it's all been incoherent, except to the extent it gives some possible preview of what they see as coming. Two big slip-ups in the interview. That's the first, revealing not just Gates is there, but the very existence of that other meeting. And then the whole trying to move the goalposts on collusion, you know, years of no collusion, no collusion, no collusion. Oh, wait, what's collusion? It was incoherent and frenetic, and you were looking for someone to sort of cart him away and give him a sedative. And I don't agree that it's the best he can do, even if they don't have much in substance. You can try to contrast with the manic crass. Oh, and speaking of crass, how about that comment, Mueller, stand up and be a man? I mean, it echoes Trump, and the thing to do here, and someone else could do it, even without substance, is speak with some dignity, some calm, make certain legal points. Even if you're chastising Mueller, there's a way to do it that people might actually listen. This frenetic, unhinged performance makes you think that nobody has any idea what they're doing over there. And the real lawyer in charge, Emmett Flood, must be tearing his hair out listening to both Trump and Giuliani, completely losing it on national TV. By the way, at least Trump's tweets are all going to be admissible. Everything he says would come into court. Just misstep after misstep.
And Nir, it seems that Rudy Giuliani's calculation, if there is one, is that what worked for Donald Trump in the campaign to eke out a win in the Electoral College can work here.
I mean, I would have to say, for everyone on TV, what part of the Donald Trump presidency has been dignified so far? I mean, who associated with Donald Trump is thinking the first job is to be dignified in their response on TV or anywhere else? But I think truly that Rudy Giuliani is just doing a kind of carnival barker experience here, experiment, and trying to just throw sand in the air, muddy the waters, make people believe there's some response. Donald Trump has been incredibly successful in getting a minority of the country to agree with him on some pretty wild claims, and I think that is their strategy going forward, to just get their base to believe this whole thing is tainted. The one thing I would say, though, is that this strategy post-Helsinki, I think, will be much less successful because people saw themselves, the broad public saw themselves, Donald Trump basically kowtowing to Putin, and this whole issue of Russia was made really clear to the American people. And public polls since Helsinki have shown stronger support, even amongst Republicans, for the Mueller probe and for finding out what happens. And that's why I think the White House is almost in this panic, and Giuliani's performance is so panicked, particularly on the eve of the Manafort trial.
And Jill, as to the question of conflict of interest for Mueller, Rod Rosenstein said in testifying to Congress that there is a process in the Justice Department for bringing conflicts of interest to them. They're open to it. You want to bring them a conflict of interest, they will examine it. And he said there are no conflicts of interest with Robert Mueller. And the notion that the president offered him or considered him for FBI director is unclear. We have never heard Mueller's side of that conversation. It could be that Mueller went in there to explain to the president that he could not do it and possibly make some suggestions to him about who he should choose. We don't know what was in that conversation.
Exactly. And all of this really is nonsense, because there was a lot of discussion about potential conflict of interest having to do with Mueller's golf club membership at a Trump club and some dispute about the fees. And that was resolved a long time ago. It was reviewed by the Department of Justice. There is no conflict of interest. The president is simply repeating over and over again, because it seems to have some effectiveness. He just keeps saying, in the same way he says no collusion, and then hopes that his base will believe that, even though it isn't. And he argues, as he has done, that the facts are not there, that the law isn't there. And, you know, the truth is, if the law is against you, argue the facts. If the facts are against you, argue the law. If both are against you, you better plead guilty. And I think we're getting to the point where we can see guilt very clearly. And I think he is now worried, because I think he finally has seen all of the evidence that came from Cohen's office. And I think if there's any leaks coming, it's coming from them to get out ahead of this. They want to protect and sort of get the first word. It's a very basic tenet of trial advocacy that if there's something bad, get it out yourself on direct examination. Don't wait till cross.
Jill Wine-Banks, Harry Lipman, Nir Attendant, thank you for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.